Good morning. Can you feel the suspense? As you can see, we are starting a brand new series called Heroes, and it's going to be about 3 weeks. As you can see, we kind of gave you a little hint of who we're going to talk about: Paul, Samson, and Jesus. And we're going to walk through some of their heroic stories, some of the stories about them, and kind of what makes a hero. I think if I had to guess, how many of you all love superheroes? Okay, not as many. How many of you all love a good hero story? There you go. A little more people than that. That's kind of what I figured. I've never really been one that's been super big on the whole superhero stuff, but I've enjoyed it because I think everybody loves a good hero story. I enjoy how it all, what I love about it is I love the backstory. I love learning about what actually happened before they became a hero. Because I think sometimes when we're going to get there today, if we take it and look at ourselves and go, how can we be a hero if we've got all of this other stuff that's in our past that we've either done or we've said or we've not been the hero then, how can we become a hero now? And so that's really going to be kind of what we dive into, what we talk about. How many of you all are caught up on all of the Marvel movies? Anybody in the room? Okay. 2 of you. Yeah, I'm right there with you, don't worry. I don't even know how many there are because there is a plethora of them. I love sitting down and talking to people who actually know it because I feel like I've watched something of them. I'm one of those people that when the Avengers came out, I went and watched it and went, what in the world was that about? Great movies, great way that they put it all together, but I didn't understand it because I didn't know the full story. And Marvel is one of those big spider webs, if you would, because everything is connected and everything has a reason, and every person, every plot that's ever gone into it has a reason in the whole Marvel world. And so we're not really going to talk about Marvel per se, but it is going to be a baseline because I believe that in our society that's where people see superheroes. They see them in movies. But we don't just see them in movies. We can see, for me, I was thinking about what were we going to talk about in this Heroes when I'm not really a superhero buff. My heroes were more sports related. Like, it thrilled me to know that one of my biggest heroes was coming back to St. Louis for his final season. Albert Pujols. When I was growing up, he was a hero in St. Louis. And so we see that in sports, I mean, we're talking, if you want to go stay in the state, back when the Rams were still the St. Louis Rams, you had Marshall Faulk, you had Isaac Bruce, you had Torrey Holt, Kurt Warner. We had some heroes. We still have some heroes over in Kansas City. And so when we start thinking about heroes and what people define as a hero, what does that actually mean? And so when we talk about a hero, I think there's some things that go into making a hero a hero. I think there definitely is a part of what makes a hero is their backstory. Because if you don't know the backstory of why they're at the place that they're at, you don't truly grasp the whole picture. And so I was walking through some different superhero montages over the last few weeks. And I began to say, well, yeah, there's one. You have Spider-Man. We know the backstory of him. We clearly see how Spider-Man came to be. And the list, you can make the list go on and on and on. And so as we walk through this, I want you to put yourself in that situation. Because I think in our world we see sports players that might be considered heroes. We see superheroes in the movies that are obviously considered heroes. And then I believe that there's probably real life people that maybe you either know of or that you know personally that you would consider a hero? Like, I've got a list of people in my life that I go, they're a hero. Or, man, they saved my life. I think that's part of what a hero does. There's a moment in time where they have a choice to make, right? It's generally the crossroads of a superhero. What makes a hero is where they decide what they're going to be. Because we already know that they're great, but how are they going to use their greatness? How are they going to actually use the greatness that they have been given? Are they going to use it for good, or are they going to use it for evil? Because greatness can go either way. You can be a great villain, or you can be a great superhero. And so that's where we kind of are going to start off by talking through this Heroes series. Today we're going to talk about a guy named Paul. But we're going to give a lot of backstory on Paul, because I want you to truly grasp what the change in Paul's life. And so what do you think actually made Paul a hero? We talk about it often. We say, oh, well, Paul wrote half or more of the New Testament. He was one of the greatest missionaries of all time. I mean, I definitely think that that's part of what makes him a hero. But that's only the good things, right? If we just got done saying that what I think makes a good hero a great hero is that even the stuff that added up to it and the backstory, it all goes along with the story. And so where we're going to start with Paul, and the reason why I think Paul is a great hero, and I think he's a wonderful one to start the series out, is because how many of y'all have ever heard of the arc of something? Like the arc of what all encapsulates in it, like the Marvel arc. Like, it is huge. I'm not talking about Noah's ark. I'm talking about what encapsulates everything in it. So like the Marvel arc is very big, and it has a lot of movies and a lot of characters and a lot of stuff that goes on that I don't even understand. But the arc of Paul is one that is truly one that went from a villain to a superhero in a blink of an eye. And so what we see, and if you all didn't know this, I just got back from vacation. And so I'm going to give you some Disney references, because we went to Disney. And I love Disney, so if you don't, I'm sorry, but I love it. And one of my favorite movies of all time, when I was growing up, I wore out a VHS, was Hercules, one of the greatest superheroes of all time. So y'all are laughing at me. But believe me, the reason why I say that is because at the very start of the movie, in the movie there's a song written especially for what I think happens to us. At times we go, well, we can't be a hero because we're a zero. There's a song in that movie that's called Zero to Hero. And I believe that is sometimes so true, but because you don't see it, you don't see the change and how it works out. And so we end up saying, well, we don't think it's actually possible to actually occur in our life. Or it only happens in movies. Or sports players are only heroes because they were just blessed with so much talent. Were they? Or did they work harder? Were they, or did they put in the time? Were they, or did they do the things to make them good? I believe that there's talent, don't get me wrong. I believe that all of them have a certain level of talent that probably I don't have. But I also believe that they put in a lot of work. I believe that heroes can't expect to go from zero to hero overnight by doing nothing. Right. I mean, come on. One of the greatest heroes of all time in another movie, Rocky. We know Rocky, right? We know the famous scenes of him running through Philadelphia, running up the steps, punching the sides of beef. He worked hard. He got from a zero to a hero over what looked like overnight. Now we know it wasn't. Believe me, I've ran up those stairs. They are tough. They are hard. I got to the top of them huffing and puffing. So what we see is that sometimes that whole zero to hero mentality is something that is a lot harder than maybe what most people want to put in. And so that's kind of where we're gonna hit on today. We're gonna take a step back. And I'm gonna compare Paul to two of the Avengers right now. So if you're in the room, maybe you know a little bit more about this than I do. But I picked out two because they're two that went from villains to heroes. We have Hawkeye, I about said them wrong because I don't know who they are. Hawkeye and Black Widow. And a male and a female. They were villains in the comics, and they have transformed into heroes. They decided, they made the choice to join sides and to change their ways, to change the actions that they did, and join the Avengers team. And so that's kind of what we see with Paul. If you all have spent much time in church at all, you've probably heard some of the stories that we're going to walk through. But something that we're going to walk through very first and foremost is something that I don't know a lot of people may or may not have known. So Paul, we all know, his original name was Saul. Everybody with me? So far, everybody's with me. His name was Saul. And when we see Saul come into the picture, I picture this like a good superhero movie. You have a lot of suspense. You have
in a dark alley somewhere far away.
Something like that. You see the buildup. The plot begins to form. What ends up happening is Saul is in an area. He's in a crowd. A man named Stephen is preaching the gospel. He was one of the apostles. And he gets grabbed. He gets thrown down in front of the group. They all go over and start grabbing these big, ginormous rocks. And Stephen cries out to God, "Forgive them! Forgive them! Forgive them!" And all in the meanwhile, you see over in the far corner, Saul. Saul hadn't done anything yet. He was a young man. The Bible actually says in Acts 7:58, they dragged him, Stephen, out of the city and began to stone him. And the witnesses laid their garments at the feet of a young man named Saul. So before we know anything about Paul, before we really know anything about how bad Saul was, as a young man, he first comes onto the scene, standing over in the corner, holding people's garments so that they can stone the first martyr of Christianity. And so we see this plot begin to form. We see what ends up taking place is that Saul begins to see the ways and the ways that he was trained up, the ways that he was taught, was that we were supposed to take out Christians. The way that he was told, and sometimes it's hard because I think in reality we do this sometimes. We go, well, why are they doing that? Well, why does somebody act like that? Well, why does somebody behave like that? Sometimes they're taught that. Or they learn it from who they're being taught from. And so we see this whole mentality of Saul begin to form, not because of his own belief, but because he sat in the corner and watched it happen. He sat in the corner and watched what would occur, what would take place. And honestly, as I begin to dig through this, we see that, and we probably all know that Saul was one of the worst for Christians in that time. I mean, it was bad. If you were a Christian, you didn't want to see Saul, because probably your end time was coming. And in that time, it was ruthless. And so what we begin to see take place, though, is we see God grabs a hold of him, right? We all know the story, I hope. If not, I'm going to tell it to you. One day Saul was on the road to Damascus. He was walking on the road to Damascus, going from place to place, and there was a great light that shone. It blinded him, it even says. And as he was blinded, he meets Jesus face to face, and so he couldn't see anything because Jesus was so powerful, was so bright, was so glorious, that it blinded him in his own physical eyes. So he'd have help walking the rest of the way to Damascus, where he meets a guy by the name of Ananias. And as he meets this man, he begins to walk through the process of changing from a zero, by hope, to a hero.
Amen.
But there's some things that have to take place. We know what ends up happening is his name changes from Saul to Paul. Why? Why do you think his name changed from Saul to Paul? Well, it changed because guess what? A hero never... the true identity as a hero is always hidden, right? We see a few of them. Because what we see is that is it true identity or is it a new identity? God takes away sometimes our true identity because maybe the true identity is what people know us as or what they used to know us as, and he gives us a new one.
Right.
So if us as people, as Christians, as believers, as people that I hope want to be heroes in the faith, one of the things that we've got to understand is that hey, our past doesn't define what our story can be.
Right.
And how he does that is he gives us a new identity. I mean, for instance, we talk about some other superheroes. Batman. We all know him as Batman. But if you're a real buff, you know him as what? Bruce Wayne. If you know Spider-Man, if you're a buff, you know that Spider-Man wasn't just Spider-Man. He didn't go around the town just as Spider-Man. He went around the town as Peter Parker. And then, come on now, Superman was what? Everybody in the room? Clark Kent. Yes. And so we see that they had a name as their human nature. But then their superhero name meant something far more. And so we have to understand that when God changes us from a zero to a hero, it no longer says, no, my name's not just Brandon. No, my name is, I'm a child of God. I'm a son of the Most High. I have power because of Jesus that gives it to me. My power doesn't come from me, it comes from Him. I'm not a superhero because of my own self. Believe me, I don't have what it takes. But because of the Holy Spirit, because of the power of Jesus that is within me, because I've been saved,
Amen. Amen.
that's the changing moment.
Amen.
There's a moment in time when we have to go yes or no, good or evil. That's the part where we say, 1 John 1:9, it clearly states that if you believe in your mouth and confess, if you believe in your heart and confess with your mouth that He is Lord, then you will be saved. That's the choice that you have to make. That's the choice between good and evil. And in that moment, that's the moment that it happens. The moment that the process begins to take place. But that doesn't just mean you go from one to the other. There's still a process. It's called sanctification. I know that's a big churchy word. All that simply means is going from what you want to be to who God wants you to be. God has something far more for each of us. He has a purpose, He has a plan lined out for all of us.
That's right. Yeah.
And sometimes, we don't know what that plan looks like. Sometimes maybe some of us don't want to even know what that plan looks like because it's scary. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's tough. But I can promise you it's the best plan. I can promise you it's a plan that's good for you. I can promise you it's a plan that's going to give you a future. I can promise that it's going to be a plan that's going to take you from being a zero to a hero. Some other things that it takes to being a hero is understanding the hero complex. You see, the hero complex is when you're on the edge of the pit. You don't know what I mean by that. You can see what your downfall is. You can see, I don't know if that's really where I want to go. You can see it, and you have a choice. As a hero, you go, no, I'm not going there. That's not for me. I've been called somewhere different. I've been called to go over here because that's what God has for me. That's the plan and the purpose for my life. See, Paul thought he was doing the right thing. Paul thought that he was doing the perfect thing by ridding the earth of Christians. He didn't know in the time that he was doing anything wrong. He thought he was doing what he was trained to do, what he was taught to do. So by the books, he was doing everything right. God had a different plan. God had a different purpose. I love when God grasps a hold of somebody, and Paul's a wonderful one to talk about this. When he grabs a hold of somebody and completely wrecks their world. It's a wonderful thing to see. Honestly, it's a beautiful thing to see because he takes you from where you've been to where he wants you to be. And that's something that I don't think anybody can do but God. And so in this moment that Paul has with God, it's a moment that radically changes him for forever. You see, he was brought up a certain way. He was a Jewish boy. If you look up anything much about him, he was Israelite-ish, is what I could find. It was funny. He was Israelite-ish. So he learned the things. He learned the stuff. He didn't do the stuff that he learned. So he made a choice to go one way. How many of us would be brave enough this morning to say that there's been a time in our life where maybe we've chose to go the wrong way? Anybody in the room? Yeah. I'll raise both of my hands. There's been plenty of times in my life where this looks like a lot of fun. This is definitely a lot of fun, so I'm going to run that way. All while knowing that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. That's not what God has for me. But when God wrecks your world, when he says, no, that's not what I have for you. I want you over here. There's nothing that can stop that. And so then we get to see this next thing that happens. For heroes discover purpose. They discover their purpose. In that moment, in the change, generally it's not at the moment that the change happens, it's the moment of the process. Throughout the process, they begin to discover what their purpose in life is. We all know the stories of heroes. One of the greatest things is what they do to save people, right? Whether it's Spider-Man and he shoots a web and he saves them from falling, you name it. If it's Hercules and he lifts the rock off the little kid, come on, but it's better than that. That's the best. Oh. Or when Hercules is training and he has to jump through the swinging axes. Oh, love it. We get to see the process of the purpose in their lives come to bed. It comes to fruition. It's the moment of understanding that, yes, God has taken me and placed me somewhere different, but through the process of how he's molding me into what's different, begin to learn my purpose in life. Paul learned that. Paul had to learn what his purpose was. Why was he being changed from one person to another? Because what we see from Paul is that he is completely a different person than what we saw at the stoning of Stephen. What we know about Paul, it's a completely different person. And so what do we see that Paul understood about his purpose? 1 Corinthians 9, what I love about this is Paul is writing to the church of Corinth, and he just lays it all out there for them on what it is that he was sent to do. Why was he changed from Saul to Paul, and why is he doing it? Why is he walking this walk, and why is he talking the talk? What is the purpose that he has? And what I love about this passage that we're going to read in verse 19 to 23 is really this is the motto in which Paul lived his life after the change occurred. It goes on, it says, "Although I am free from all and not anyone's slave, I have made myself a slave to everyone." Kind of odd wording, right? But he did it in order to win people. To the Jews, I became like a Jew to win Jews. To those under the law, like one under the law, though I myself I am not under the law, to win those under the law. Verse 21, to those who are without the law, like one without the law, I am not one without God's law, but under the law of Christ, I did it in order to win those without the law. To the weak, I became weak in order to win the weak. I have become all things to all people. Now, this is my favorite part. This is the climax of his purpose. I have become all things to all people so that I may, by every possible means, save some.
Amen.
That was the motto of his life. He did all of these things. He became this to win that. He became weak to win the weak. He became a Jew to win the Jews. He became one under the law to win the ones under the law. He became without the law to win the ones without the law. And we see this time and time again because Paul was Paul no matter what. But he became this man who could win every single person that he came in contact with. But he goes, I know that I'm not going to win all. But if I can by all possible means win some, if I can save some of them, then I've done my job.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
I've done my life's purpose. For us, where do we sit on that? I think sometimes for us, we get the whole phrasing kind of mixed up. So well, we're not supposed to be of the world. That's odd that Paul would become all of these things. We're not supposed to be of the world. No, we're supposed to be in the world. Because light is only light if it's in darkness. Am I right? If we were called to be a light, and there's light all around you, you don't shine. Yeah, you do shine, but you don't stand out. If you place yourself in darkness, that's where you're able to shine. So you have to be in the world. You don't have to be of the world. There's a difference there. There's a difference because in order to save some, we have to go get the some. I love the song that they sang right before the sermon, at the end of the worship. They sang a song called Reckless Love. And we can argue or debate on how well the song is or how great it is or all that good stuff. But the truth that's found in it is wonderful. He leaves the 99. He leaves the 99 to go after the one. Jesus taught on that principle. Whether it was a coin to the rich people that he was talking to, whether it was a sheep to the shepherds that he was talking to, he left the 99 in search for the lost one. In search for the lost one. See, understand, if I can just say some, if I can get some of them to understand up here and believe here and confess with this, then I've done my job.
Amen.
Then I've done my job. Follows it up, verse 23. Paul ends it out. He says, now I do all this because of the gospel, so that I may share in the blessings. You see, there's a reward that we get to reap. And we don't do it for the reward. We don't give because we get, but we get to give. That's a principle that is oftentimes used in only offering talks or tithing talks. But it's also what we get to give as far as the gospel to people.
That's right.
As heroes, if we're not understanding that we get to give the gospel out, then we've missed it completely. We've missed it completely if we don't understand that the gospel is what we get to give. It's what we get to say, hey, this is my part, this is the purpose as a Christian, as a person that says I'm a believer, as a person that says I'm with you. It's our part. That's how we become heroes, is understanding that it's not just to come and sit in a seat and keep it warm on Sunday mornings. It's to go out there into the world. And boy, it's a dark place. You travel outside of our little bubble and you really get to see that. It's whew. Wow. But how we live our life, how we decide for ourselves, what's the choices that we're making, what's the way people see us living. Sometimes it's not always what we say. Sometimes it's how they see us live. Are we living a life of a superhero? Are we living a life that puts off Jesus, that actually shines the light that we've been called to be? You see, Paul went from power and influence to a prisoner and servant. Now that sometimes could sound, in the wrong context, could sound really bad. But when he was at his most powerful, he didn't have any power at all. When he had the most influence that he thought he had, he didn't have the influence that he could have had. When he became to understand that it's okay to be a prisoner. There multiple times was Paul thrown in jail. Well, multiple times was he thrown in jail. Now, one of those times we get to see that the jail was rattled. That the chains were broken. The bars were shattered. The prison was completely destroyed. And they walked out unharmed. And the guards were saved. Talk about influence. He didn't have it over here. He had it when he had his change. When his life was switched, when it was flipped upside down, that's when the influence came. Being a servant, he wasn't a servant as a slave. He was a servant to God, doing the duties that God had given him the ability to do. When we understand that we should be servants of God, doing his work, that's when everything changes. Right? You see, the person, what we get to see is in the life of Paul, he was a person of the people. At first. As Saul, he was a person of the people. He went with the ebb and flows. He didn't do anything different. He went with what was taught to him. He went with what was told. And then we get to see him be a person of God. And everything was different. When you become a person of God, you do things differently. You do things differently. Naturally, you have to do things differently. I mean, just as basic as it is flipping on a switch to a light. If you're going to be a light And if it's off, it's not very different. When you turn it on, it makes a difference. You can see. You can see the things around you. You can see what's going to harm you in front of you. How many of y'all have ever walked through a dark room and stepped on a Lego? I may have one worse, and I think I've already said this before, but a Hot Wheels car. Our kid loves Hot Wheels, and those things are not fun to step on because not only does it hurt just like a Lego, but it also slides. But when there's light, you've got safety. When there's light, you've got comfort. When there's light, you've got direction. You've got that's what we've been called to do. That's what we've been called to be. You see, your story, no matter what your past looks like, no matter what the stuff you've done, the things you've said, no matter what you feel like is holding you back from being a hero, your story can change. And I don't want to sound cliche. I don't want to sound like, oh, this is the same stuff that every pastor's ever told me. Yes, it is, but why aren't you acting it out? Because it holds us back. We drag this stuff with our past, our shame and our regret, and the things that we've done, and the things that we've said, and the sin the baggage that we have with us. We carry it with us, and we carry it with us, and we carry it with us. Instead of leaving it and understanding that we can't change history, but we can change. Now listen to this. This is good. We can change our story to His story.
That's right. That's right.
Because the history that we tried to make was our story. But when we understand that it's not our story, all of this is His story. And we get to fit in it. We get to be a character in it. We get to have a place in it. And we get to do that. That's when we get to make a decision. That's when we get to understand that there is a purpose for us in our life. We were made for purpose. We were made on purpose. We were made for a purpose. All the purposes. We were made for it. We were made for it. We just have to step into it. So with every head bowed, every eye closed, this morning I want to ask that question. Who this morning needs to lay down their story and pick up His story? Who this morning needs to understand that it's not the stuff that I've done that's going to make me into the hero, but it's Him. If that's you this morning, just simply raise your hand and put it right back down. Amen. Amen.